3 days after my Dill handed me a USB with a shocking warning. An incredible secret was exposed. The evening after Aisha thrust the small USB drive into Helen's hands, something in her chest knotted tight, squeezing like a vice. "You have to look into it, Helen. The truth might change everything," she whispered, her eyes wide with concern. Helen hesitated, the familiar warmth of her garden outside her window suddenly feeling distant and cold. Was this really the time to unearth old shadows, after years of dedication to healing in Maplewood? Inside that tiny drive lay echoes from her past, tales of betrayal woven into her family history that she had carefully tucked away with her husband's passing. What if it was all buried for good reason? But curiosity gnawed at her. It had been a lifetime since she had fought for anything beyond her students' futures. A creeping sense of duty tingled beneath her skin, urging her towards the unknown buried deep. Helen worried she was merely a remnant of a life of nurturing others. Yet the flicker of a lost vigor sparked within her. She pushed the USB into her old laptop, the device humming alive. File after file opened, unraveling a tapestry of pain and loss. A land deal gone wrong, whispers of her husband's family robbed of their rightful place. Her pulse quickened as she scrolled through documents detailing the duplicity of influential figures. The very people who had praised her work as a principal now cast the shadows of malice, throbbing behind her temples, doubt mingled with resolve. Could she really confront this maze of deception? The town that had always felt like a cocoon now loomed with hostility, threatening to unravel her composed facade. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The following days brought a parade of anxious visits, old friends now aligning themselves with the opposing lane of her pursuit for truth. The small-town familiarities felt suffocating, the sense of camaraderie now a cloak for veiled threats. Helen's eyes caught whispers exchanged during her morning walks, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. Something was terribly amiss, and with every interaction her heart raced. Anxiety curled inside her like creeping vines, tightening around her resolve. Did she really want to dredge up the past that others claimed was better left buried? In a chance encounter at the grocery store, a muted murmur floated through the aisles. Her old friend Eleanor averting her gaze, lips pursed tight. It was as if acknowledging Helen meant breaching a precarious truce, nestled within the heart of Maplewood's facade. Instead of a friendly smile, Eleanor turned, avoiding any conversation that might urge Helen toward her investigation. It felt like a warning. A sickening sensation lurked at the back of her mind, growing louder with each confrontation. Then the note arrived, slid under her door in an unmarked envelope. "Stop this. It's not worth it." The ink bled black against the white paper, pulsing with urgency, clutching at her throat. Who was watching? Who wanted her to cower in silence? The cozy life she'd wrapped around her felt like a fragile thread, with dark truths ready to unravel. And yet, as her heart thundered with fear, something deeper ignited inside her. The idea of quitting now felt like abandoning everything she held dear. Her husband's legacy, her children's right to know the truth. The stakes had never been higher. Tangled paths lay before her, each twist beckoning her closer. Time slipped through her fingers like grains of sand, the urgency mounting. Could she silence her growing dread long enough to reclaim what had been forcefully taken from her family? Each step toward uncovering the truth gripped her with an intoxicating desire for closure, even as the shadows deepened around her. When Helen awoke the next morning, She felt the weight of the decision looming over her like a storm cloud. Her heart raced while she stared blankly at her familiar kitchen, the sunlight slicing through the window, casting long shadows across the counter. Silence filled the room, amplifying the chaos swirling in her mind. There had to be a way to confront this looming threat, to reclaim the narrative that others had twisted into something malign. Determined, she brewed a strong cup of coffee, its bitter aroma pulling her back to the present. She needed clarity, focus. Those documents contain not just information but a remnant of her and her husband's shared history. The truth might very well help her make sense of a past buried too deep. But what of the people who would take her revelations as a personal attack? Would they stop at a note under her door? As she allowed the caffeine to settle into her system, Helen grabbed a notepad. Her fingers trembled slightly as she wrote down names from the documents. The influential town figures and their connections. Each name drew a line to a memory. A face she recognized smiling at her during community events. A hand extended in friendship. How easily trust had devolved into suspicion. She paused, taking a deep breath as she realized how personal and vital this undertaking was. It was more than just exposing deceit. It was her chance for empowerment, a way to step into a space she'd avoided for so long. The world of confrontation and tenacity. After years of soothing and nurturing, she felt strange in this role of a protector, one who would defend her family's rightful legacy. Helen knew she had to confront the truth head-on, but she knew she needed allies. The first name to stand out was Aisha. Aisha had always been the wild spirit who encouraged her to step outside her comfort zone, relentlessly pursuing her passions. Inviting her over could bring a fresh perspective, and perhaps support in her endeavors. She reached for her phone, quickly drafting a message. The response was immediate and encouraging. They agreed to meet later that afternoon, a moment Helen was determined to prepare for. In the meantime, her mind wandered to Eleanor. That fleeting glance in the grocery store haunted her. The trust they once shared was now beset by shadows. Helen wondered if Eleanor might know more than she let on. How could she confront her old friend without escalating the tension? Determined to discover more, Helen decided to visit the local library, intending to probe into past town records. While there, she could gather information discreetly, finding traces of the past that sought to remain hidden. The library was a refuge where the whispers of history layered in books could provide her with insight and understanding. As she stepped into the quiet sanctuary, bookshelves towering above her, the scent of aging paper filled the air. She dove into the archives, sorting through faded records and letters, feeling the thrill of digging deeper into the years that shaped her town, and, ultimately, her family. Each discovered document carried the weight of her anxiety and anticipation, a paradox of emotions bubbling beneath her determined demeanor. Hours slipped away as Helen unearthed a particularly revealing letter connected to a land deal. A letter that lay beneath layers of guarded conversations she thought were closed chapters. It was unsettling and exhilarating, exposing corruption that ran deeper than she had imagined. With each word, she pieced together a quilt of betrayal that tied the past with her present. As she stepped out of the library into the fading afternoon light, the shadows around her seemed to deepen. A sense of urgency kicked in. Acquiring the truth was only the first step. The real battle loomed ahead, confronting those who were complicit in the silence. Would Aisha stand by her when the reality bared its ugly teeth? And what about Eleanor? The shadows loomed larger, but Helen's resolve was clear. It was time to find out who was truly on her side and who sought to keep her silent. The meeting with Aisha couldn't come soon enough. She needed a strategy, a plan to reveal what lay ahead. And the clock was ticking. What would she uncover about her friends and foes in the coming hours? The sun dipped lower in the sky as Helen glanced at the clock, measuring her impatience against the seconds slipping away. She straightened her shoulders and focused her thoughts. The research had ignited a fire she hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose igniting her resolve. This was her moment. When Aisha finally arrived, Helen felt an unexpected surge of energy. Aisha burst through the door, her free spirit as vibrant as ever, seemingly unencumbered by the gravity of the situation which loomed over Helen. Without the luxury of small talk, Helen pulled her friend into the kitchen, where the faint sound of coffee brewing played like a backdrop to her internal chaos. "Have you been all right?" Aisha asked, concern shadowing her expression as she took in Helen's anxious demeanor. "I need your help," Helen replied, their eyes locking. There was no room for hesitation. She needed to lay her cards on the table. As Aisha nodded, Helen described the letters she found tucked away in the library. Each detail felt heavy on her tongue, but each word was laced with the thrill of recognition. She showed Aisha the damning evidence of deceit woven into the fabric of their lives. They pored over the documents, examining the implications with the intensity of detectives solving a cold case. Aisha's eyes widened as the connections began to unfold, and together they began mapping out how to confront those who had tangled the truth. Each suggestion Aisha made fueled Helen's growing confidence. The mere act of sharing her burden lightened the load on her heart, transforming her fear into a calculated desire for justice. "We need to approach this carefully," Aisha cautioned, pen poised dangerously over a notepad. "If these people have been lying all this time, they won't welcome you digging around." Helen nodded, brow furrowed. "I know, but they've hidden the truth for too long. I'll prepare myself for whatever they throw at me. But my family deserves to know the truth about what's been done in their name." As they continued to plan, every strategic discussion revealed a new layer of Helen's determination. The embarrassment of feeling ineffectual weighed less on her as the strategy formed. Each second felt more manageable alongside Aisha's optimism, urging Helen out of her emotional fog. This wasn't just about unearthing past injustices. This was about unveiling her identity as a formidable advocate for her family. But Helen couldn't ignore the unease lingering at the back of her mind. As they spoke about tactics and possible repercussions with a sense of empowerment, she couldn't shake off thoughts of Eleanor. Did her old friend harbor secrets that would complicate her journey? What if Eleanor stood in opposition? "Helen, we'll make a strong approach. Just promise me you'll stay calm," Aisha urged, reading the inner conflict brewing in her friend's eyes. "You inherit that strength your mother had, remember?" A flash of memory cascaded through Helen. The fierce woman who had taught her the importance of resolution, who had resolved to stand her ground against injustices the same way she intended to now. But was she ready to face a woman who had once been a friend, yet now felt like an enigma obscured by layers of disdain? After several hours of strategizing, Helen felt the tension in the room shift as Aisha handed her a folder. "Here. You'll need this. It's a beginning, but you must also prepare for the storm that's coming." Taking a deep breath, Helen folded the folder close, feeling the weight of the decision pressing against her chest. Tomorrow, she would confront the first layer of her hidden truth. As they wrapped up their evening, Aisha paused, her expression serious. "You need to think about how everything will change from now on. Once you take that step into the light, there's no turning back. Are you ready for whatever happens next?" The finality of Aisha's words washed over Helen, mixing fear and adrenaline in her veins. Yes, she thought, desperately clutching onto her resolve. The seams of her old world were fraying, and she was prepared to rip them apart. And as they stood, ready to take the next step together, Helen's heart raced with both anticipation and trepidation. The moment she had been moving toward was almost upon her. A moment that would redefine everything. But would she still recognize herself on the other side? That question lingered in the shadows, just like the faces she would soon confront. Tomorrow awaited with its own truths, and they weren't going to wait for Helen to stand in their way. The morning light spilled into Helen's kitchen, casting long shadows that danced across the floor, as if echoing her uncertainty. She stood silently, cradling the folder Aisha had given her, its contents swirling in her mind like chaotic leaves caught in an autumn wind. The coffee brewed, but it did little to ease the tightening in her chest. Today was the day she would face her past, and the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon her. Each sip of coffee felt like swallowing shards of glass, sharp and uncomfortable. She was grateful for the routine, the normalcy of the morning. Yet every mundane action felt minuscule against the avalanche of what lay ahead. She needed clarity, so she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the memories of her mother's undeterred spirit. Helen's fingers brushed the edges of the folder, feeling the strength seep through it and into her. Helen had spent the night replaying her strategy, resolving how to manage each encounter, particularly the one with Eleanor. She couldn't allow fear of confrontation to paralyze her. Instead, she tried to channel the energy coursing through her, fervent and undulating. When had she transformed from the quiet girl who shied away from conflict to this woman who dared to demand her place? As she prepared, Helen's mind drifted to the letters again. They were more than historical documents. They were the pulse of her family's hidden narrative, and she was determined to give it a voice. She caught herself in the reflection of the window, a stranger looking back with fire in her eyes. This wasn't just about finding answers. It was about confronting the very fabric of her legacy. Arriving at the library felt monumental, as if she were stepping onto sacred ground. The musty scent of aging paper enveloped her, warming her with familiarity. But today, it was tinged with something else, a prophecy of confrontation. She approached their usual meeting table, her heart pounding loudly in her ears. Eleanor often sat there, enshrined in the soft light that filtered through the old panes, unaware of the storm brewing just outside. As she waited, Helen considered what she would say. The plan coiled within her, so long and arduous to form, now felt liquid and unfurling. Would Eleanor admit to her part in the deception, or would she feign innocence? This encounter could very well fracture the bond born from years of shared history, and the thought glimmered ominously at the back of her mind. The door creaked open, and Eleanor stepped inside, her expression unsettlingly serene. There was a moment of recognition, a shared silence, reflecting both confusion and the weight of unsaid truths. "Helen," she greeted, though her voice was devoid of warmth. "Helen," she repeated, prompting Helen to acknowledge her presence while masking the suspicions that surged within. "I wanted to discuss the letters." At the mere mention of the letters, Helen could feel the tension in the air thicken. Every instinct urged her to delve into the conversation, to uncover the layers of deceit and confront the ingrained falsehoods. As Eleanor's gaze shifted slightly, Helen caught the flicker of discomfort that belied her steadiness. Adrenaline coursed through her as she braced herself to reveal the evidence. "Eleanor, we need to talk about what happened. About the past." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her composed veneer. Helen fought against her emotions, reflecting on the injustices woven into her family story. "Have you really given this much thought?" Eleanor interjected, her caution cutting through the charged atmosphere. "More than you realize," Helen said through gritted teeth, each word forged with determination. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone. People deserve to know." As their eyes locked in a sparring match of resolve and uncertainty, Helen felt the ground beneath her shift. The conversation had begun, but the true confrontation loomed larger than either anticipated. Would her search for truth come at the cost of losing the connections she had held dear for so long? In that moment, time clung to its breath, each second stretched tight like a drawn bow, ready to release. As Helen prepared to unveil the contents of the folder, she felt a sudden awareness settling in. The stakes were higher than she had envisioned. The answer could either build a bridge to redemption or catalyze an irreparable rift. What if Eleanor had more to reveal? Something that could alter everything Helen thought she knew about her family and herself. the moment of revelation lingered, heavy and electric. As the air crackled with an intensity that could no longer be ignored, Eleanor's sharp intake of breath sliced through the room like the crack of thunder. It punctuated the silence, urging Helen forward, even as doubt threatened to creep in like a thief in the night. "Why do you need those letters, Helen?" Eleanor's voice was low, yet each word carried a weight that made Helen's heart flutter erratically. "I need the truth," Helen managed, her resolve hardening. She could no longer tiptoe around the inevitable clash. The letters were more than black and white. They were bridges to the colored history that had been obscured for too long. "You've woven a narrative, and I want to understand what you've left out." Eleanor's gaze faltered momentarily, and in that brief flicker of hesitation, Helen seized her chance. "You've always placed such importance on family legacy. But whose legacy are we really honoring here? Yours, or the one that connects to those letters?" Eleanor's face shifted, expressing a mixture of surprise and indignation. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Helen," she warned, but Helen caught a tremor in her voice. The feigned authority was cracking, and in that moment, the silence felt like the calm before the storm. "Maybe it's time we both walk through that storm," Helen replied, finding a steadiness she didn't know she possessed. "I've spent too long being afraid of your storms and your decisions. I need to know what you're hiding." With each passing second, Helen could feel her own strength coiling tighter, ready to unleash the truth that had been dormant for years. She had spent far too long tiptoeing, allowing Eleanor's calm facade to suppress her own needs and questions. Today, she would not drown beneath the surface of uncertainty. She would rise. Eleanor looked away, her fingers tapping nervously against the tabletop, betraying her stoic demeanor. "Sometimes, ignorance is better than understanding," she muttered, almost to herself. "Is it?" Helen shot back, each syllable a carefully constructed challenge. "Sometimes not knowing is worse. It's a weight that hangs on your shoulders, a shadow that never leaves." Eleanor's lips pressed together, the muscle in her jaw tightening. "You're playing with forces you don't understand. The truths hidden in those letters are not for the faint-hearted. You're about to unearth things that will change our lives forever." "Maybe that's what I want, Eleanor," Helen countered, her heartbeat flooding her senses with adrenaline. "I want to define my life, not based on the echoes of choices and mistakes made by others, but on the reality of who I truly am." The tension thickened the air, tangling around them like twisting vines ready to ensnare. Helen could feel the foundations of her courage solidifying with each passing moment. But would that be enough to breach the wall of Eleanor's defenses? "No one can prepare you for what you might find," Eleanor warned, her eyes a storm of defiance and concern. "Is that why you've hidden them from me?" The question hung heavily between them. "Is that why fear controlled your every suggestion?" Helen's words sliced through Eleanor's defenses, but Eleanor remained a fortress. For a moment, Eleanor simply stared, the depths of silence stretching painfully. The fraught intimacy of their argument felt like a crucible, distilling the essence of their shared history into something raw and potent. Then, as if a weight shifted in the very air around them, Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her face revealing a sliver of vulnerability. "What if the truth brings more pain than you're ready to handle?" "Then I'll face it," Helen declared, every phrase casting aside the remnants of her hesitation. "After all, isn't living in the truth better than walking in the shadows?" Eleanor hesitated, visibly trapped between the past she'd crafted and the truth that Helen so desperately sought. Just as Helen felt like she was breaking through, Eleanor's expression hardened again, hardness seeping into her words. "Once you see the truth, there's no going back." Helen felt a sharp intake of breath. She was teetering on the precipice, ready to leap. "Then let's go. I'm ready." With those words, She slid the folder forward across the table, a silent declaration of her determination. As the sound of the folder colliding with the surface echoed in the library, a chill coursed through her. A foreboding premonition that the revelations contained within could reshape not only her understanding of her lineage, but also the very fabric of her identity. Helen prepared for whatever might unfurl, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sensation. Was she truly ready to confront the hidden darkness? The answer lay just beyond her reach, waiting to be uncovered, teetering between truth and deception. As Eleanor's gaze settled lithely on the folder, her next words would be the reckoning. Would they provide the clarity Helen sought, or would they plunge her deeper into uncertainty? The air shimmered with potential, poised for an answer that could redefine everything. Helen watched Eleanor's expression shift, the storm of emotions swirling like a tempest. The folder lay between them, a thin barrier that held the power to redefine their relationship, to uproot the carefully tended garden of memories Eleanor had cultivated. As Eleanor's fingers brushed against the folder's edge, Helen felt a potent mix of hope and dread swelling within her. Are you sure? Once this is open, we can't ignore what's inside, Eleanor said, her voice wavering slightly. Helen sensed the gravity of the moment, like standing on the edge of a vast chasm. I've chosen this path. Uncovering the truth is the only way to reclaim my life from the shadows, Helen replied, both apprehension and resolve intertwining in her voice. Eleanor finally took a deep breath, her shoulders dropping a fraction as if a weight pressed upon them. Fine, but remember, once you see what's there, there's no turning back. There was an unmistakable vulnerability in her gaze, an acknowledgement that this might dismantle the protective walls that had long shielded them both. With a hesitant hand, Eleanor opened the folder. The letters lay before them, aged and frayed at the edges, etched with secrets that had lain dormant for years. Helen could feel the pull toward them, as if they radiated an energy that promised clarity, but threatened chaos. Eleanor's hands trembled as she carefully retrieved the first letter, unfolding it with an almost reverent grace. The faint scent of old paper was suffused with a nostalgia that clawed at Helen's heart. She leaned in, her anticipation mounting with every passing heartbeat. February 15th, 1985. Eleanor read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. To my dearest Sarah. With each word she spoke, it was as if history stepped forth to breathe life into what had been forgotten. The atmosphere shifted. The library transformed into a time capsule where past and present collided. Helen felt a pang of empathy for Eleanor. The hidden layers of her mother's resolve, an unfamiliar landscape filled with both courage and regret. Do you remember her, Eleanor? How did she shape you? Eleanor seemed lost in thought, the weight of the letters seemingly more pressing than any answer. She was complicated, always demanding the best, yet unable to forgive her own mistakes. Did she ever tell you the truth of her past? Or was it buried under expectations? Helen probed gently, her own quest for self-intertwining with Eleanor's half-formed memories. Eleanor snapped back to the moment, eyes flashing with the fierce fire of confrontation. It's not just about her. I've done what I thought was best for you, too. Sometimes protecting someone means hiding the truth. The weight of Eleanor's words sank deep, festering in Helen's heart. Is protection really worth it if it means living in a half-truth? Her heart raced. The sounds of the library faded into a backdrop as her own introspection took charge. A silence lingered, thick with implications. What Helen longed for was clarity, yet Eleanor stood like an immovable object, each of them defined as much by their choices as by each other's expectations. Eleanor continued, discomfort creeping into her posture. Those who seek the truth often find it leads them to painful revelations. Are you prepared for this? I don't know, Helen admitted, her voice softer but resolute. But I'm willing to try. I want to not only understand her, but also understand who I've become under the weight of her legacy. With that, Helena placed the first letter back into the folder, an unspoken truce hanging in the air. The unearthing had begun, but what journey awaited them? Helen's mind raced with possibilities and peril, as the realization that the upcoming letters could reveal deeply buried family truths lodged in the back of her mind. She wondered, what if the implications reached beyond her lineage and into her very identity? Let's go deeper, Helen urged, already sensing the complexity of emotions that would follow. What else lies beyond this first layer? Eleanor clenched her jaw, a flicker of hesitation betraying the depth of her resolve. Helen watched her mother wrestle between fear and the undeniable need to confront the past. But could Helen's newfound resolve withstand the storm brewing at the heart of their family legacy? The next letter awaited unwrapping, holding potential sorrow or revelation that could fracture her perceptions of both her past and future. How far was she willing to go to face the ghost that lingered in the shadows? And as Eleanor reached for the next fragile piece of parchment, the words she began to read hovered in the charged air between them, a prelude to truths that could either unite or tear them apart. Eleanor's fingers hesitated over the letter, poised between the weight of her past and the unknown future looming ahead. With a decisive flutter of breath, she made the choice to unravel another layer of family history. The air crackled with tension. A moment outwardly still, yet undercurrents of anxiety surged silently through the library. Helen felt her heart rate quicken, sensing the significance of this act, not just for them, but for the very identity she was striving to understand. "Here we go," Eleanor said, her voice steadier now, but laced with unvoiced apprehensions. "This one is dated April 8th, 1987. The moment the letter unfolded, dusty memories lay bare, and for Helen, both excitement and trepidation coalesced into an irrevocable decision. As her mother's voice filtered through the cluttered air, Helen found herself glancing at Eleanor's rigid features, searching for clues to the woman hidden behind layers of expectations. The lamplight flickered, casting dancing shadows that mirrored the uncertainty in Helen's mind. Had Eleanor, in shielding her from truth, inadvertently robbed her of the chance to understand herself? "Never forget, Sarah." Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. "My choices were meant to protect you, even if they chained me." Each word hit Helen like a deliberate pulse, nudging her toward the realization that Eleanor's fears had crafted impenetrable barriers in their relationship. "What does she mean by that?" Helen asked softly, urgency threading through her tone. Eleanor paused, her eyes flickering from the words on the page to the memories haunting her thoughts. My mother felt responsible for every moment that led to her decisions. Her past had been a tempest, and out of that, she sought to create a calm. I always thought that I could navigate the future without dredging her past. Eleanor's tension radiated through the air, palpable, as if she stood at the precipice of a revelation that could radically change everything. What if confronting it head-on could break that chain? Helen countered, emboldened. What if opening the door to those shadows actually liberates us? "Do you even know what's behind it?" Eleanor shot back, the flicker of fear igniting something within Helen. There was power in revulsion against fear. She was learning that. Helen steadied her breath, mentally preparing for the plunge. "I want to know, even if it hurts," Helen confessed, the words erupting from a place deep inside her, where newfound conviction began to take root. She felt the swell of her own strength amid the uncertainty, notable yet burgeoning, much like a phoenix waiting for the chance to rise. Understanding that past, however painful, is essential if I am to reclaim my own story. Eleanor's gaze softened for a moment as if a flicker of understanding passed between them. As the reading continued, each line peeled back more layers of historical context, revealing deep-rooted vulnerabilities. a sprawling family tapestry woven from fear, sacrifice, and lost opportunities. Helen's chest tightened with each revelation, for the past crafted an indelible imprint on her very existence, each thread leading her closer to understanding her mother's choices, and in turn, herself. April 15th, 1987. Eleanor read aloud again, her voice barely above a whisper. I see now that my own fears have often scarred you, and perhaps that is the legacy I've unwittingly passed down. The tremor in her voice was unmistakable, and Helen could feel raw honesty radiating from her mother. It was discomforting, yet exhilarating. Hiding from those fears only festers more pain, Helen urged, her heart swelling with urgency. Maybe we can rewrite our narrative together. A heavy silence enveloped them again, both women staring at the remnants of the letter that illuminated the potential paths ahead. It was a risky endeavor, yet the prospect of shared vulnerability and strength emanating from their bond felt ripe for the taking. If they could dismantle the fears embedded in their lineage, perhaps together they could forge new connections, a new understanding of self rooted not in past grievances, but in redemption and reclamation. Just as Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, the atmosphere shifted again, heavy with anticipation and unsaid words. Would this journey truly illuminate the deepest wounds, as well as the hidden strengths they could exchange? Would Eleanor embrace the shifts Helen sought? Before Eleanor could respond, her phone buzzed ominously, vibrating its own echo of dread against the table. The tension settled back in as they both glanced toward the screen, their hearts sinking in the charged silence. In that moment, an unexpected realization struck Helen. What if the next layer was not just about the family history, but an impending reality threatening to upend everything they had built? Eleanor's eyes widened as she glanced at the screen, her face shifting from curiosity to alarm. "What is it?" Helen asked, her pulse quickening again. "I don't know," Eleanor murmured, her voice tight. "But the moment of truth may have come quicker than we thought." And with that, the weight of the unknown loomed large, a call to action echoing in the twisted paths of their lineage. The silence stretched as Eleanor's fingers hovered over her phone, the screen casting an eerie glow on her tense expression. Helen felt a collision of anticipation and dread, her heart racing against the uncertainty bubbling under the surface. Whatever lay behind that notification could either shatter their fragile moment of connection or provoke an awakening neither was prepared for. "What if it's something bad?" Helen asked, her throat tightening. The fear laced in her words was a stark contrast to the resolve she had just summoned. Uncertainty tugged at her, threatening to steal away her newfound courage. Eleanor took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering from the screen. "That's precisely why we need to know. We can't back away from this." Just as her mother's determination radiated, Helen felt a jolt of inspiration surge through her. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The confrontation not just with their family history, but with the truths that could redefine them. "Open it," Helen said, her voice steadying. The decision felt monumental, a turning point that promised either illumination or despair. With a swift, measured movement, Eleanor tapped the notification, revealing a message that seemed to pulse with gravity. "Your father wants to meet." Eleanor read aloud, her voice a mixture of incredulity and reluctance. "Tomorrow." The air thickened as the implications sank in. Helen's mind raced, spinning with the ripple effects of this unexpected invitation. The shadow of her father, long an unspoken specter, now hovered just under the threshold of their lives. "Do you think he knows?" Helen questioned, her pulse pounding against her temples. The immediate presence of her father, a figure who had shaped her reality from afar, threatened to reshape her understanding of herself. The echo of questions from childhood, about his absence, his choices, swelled within her. "I don't know," Eleanor replied, her voice barely a whisper. But avoiding him is no longer an option. Helena's resilience sparked a flicker of determination in Helen. Perhaps confronting her father was not merely about gathering family history. It was a crucial step in reclaiming her own narrative. "Then we must go," Helen stated, steeling her resolve against her mother's anxious expression. "This meeting might unravel everything he built to keep us apart." Each word felt like a declaration, one that carved a path toward their own autonomy from inherited fears. Yet doubt lurked like an uninvited guest at their meeting. What if he's not ready for this? Eleanor pondered, her breath hitching slightly. The vulnerabilities of the past threatened to surface, and Helen sensed her mother's apprehension intertwining with her own. "Then we'll be the ones to draw the line," Helen asserted. "We've done the work to understand each other. Now we need to extend that understanding toward him." The notion encouraged an exhilaration within her. This was about more than just her father. It was about asserting a new legacy against the tide of their haunting lineage. Eleanor met her gaze, a silent dialogue passing between them, bridging the chasm of fears, slowly giving way to hope. "You're right. We have the power to change things." The flickering light of the lamp echoed the warmth igniting in Helen's chest, a beacon guiding them away from cycles of pain. "Yes," Helen continued, emboldened. "We can confront him. But I need you by my side." The gesture wasn't just about her own courage. It was a promise of solidarity, an unbreakable bond threading them together in this trepidatious journey ahead. As they braced for the unexpected, a new question loomed. What actually lay beneath her father's intentions? Would he meet them with remorse, or would resistance mark their encounter? There was no turning back now. The chains were breaking. Eleanor received the message again in silence, contemplating the weight of its meaning. "Tomorrow at noon," she murmured. A sudden roar of uncertainty replaced the initial rush of adrenaline. The reverberating ramifications felt almost unbearable. Yet among the trepidation, Helen recognized a flicker of potential. Reclaiming her voice meant more than confronting her father. It was about challenging herself, about transforming uncertainty into action, and doubt into determination. "Let's prepare," Helen declared, glancing toward the dim stacks of the library that held their stories. Their truth. The legacy that once seemed like a tangled web, now transformed into possibility, ripe for exploration and articulation. "It'll be the beginning," Eleanor whispered, almost to herself. "Of what?" Helen asked as they both turned toward the door. "Of rewriting our story," Eleanor answered, a resilient calm settling over her. "But it all depends on how we approach this meeting." As they stepped away from the past momentarily, another question loomed in Helen's mind. Would this confrontation forge a path toward reconciliation, or would it deepen the fractures of their family history? The night stretched ahead, dark and uncertain, brimming with shadows that flickered with the weight of lingering memories. Suddenly, there it was. The urgency to move forward crystallized within her. Helen felt a deepening seed of resolve. Tomorrow would be their reckoning, a true confrontation of past and present. Yet amidst the urgency, another thought gripped her. Was she truly prepared for the identity-shattering revelations that awaited them in the dawn of the new day? The dawn crept in, its light barely penetrating the layers of uncertainty that coated Helen's mind. She sat on the edge of her bed, her pulse quickening with each sound, echoing through the stillness of the morning. Every tick of the clock seemed to remind her of the impending confrontation with her father. It felt surreal, a collision of past and present, where her heart raced at the thought of meeting the man who had shaped her life by his absence. Helen took a deep breath, anchoring herself in the reality of the moment. Today, she would not be the girl who waited in the shadows for validation. Today, she would stand in the light of her own truth. It was time to assess what rooted her weaknesses and to nurture her strengths. She needed clarity amidst the clutter of emotions swirling in her mind. Focus on the facts, she muttered to herself, silently rehearsing how she would approach the meeting. She envisioned herself walking in with confidence, undeterred by the ghost that her father had become. As she prepared, flashes of her childhood memories surfaced, bits of laughter and shadowy figures that she had woven into the tapestry of her understanding. She had narratives to confront, questions to ask, and boundaries to establish. Helen spent the morning crafting her thoughts into coherent statements. She scribbled in her journal, meticulously shaping words that held power. Each line was a step closer to empowerment, a reclamation of her voice that had often been stifled. She questioned what she needed to establish in this meeting. Was it closure? Understanding? Or simply the courage to face the fractures of her past? The act of writing bolstered her resolve, transforming uncertainty into articulate intention. "Why now?" she wrote, pausing before the ink dried. It was vital to interrogate the motives behind her father's sudden desire to connect. The question hung heavy in the air, echoing her own internal conflict. She could forge ahead, confronting her father with the emotional artillery she had meticulously crafted, or she could play it safe, shying away from probing too deeply into the chaos of his life. Moments before she had to leave, Helen glanced in the mirror. Looking back was a woman born from her struggles, ready to face the impassive figure of her father in the flesh. The reflection offered a mix of trepidation and strength, a delicate balance of vulnerability that she understood could be her greatest asset, not a liability. This recognition of her own fortitude filled her with a sense of purpose. As she entered the car, the weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. Eleanor sat beside her, the silence between them thick yet charged with mutual understanding. Helen's mind raced through her plan, briefly overshadowing doubts that sought entrance. What if he didn't recognize the change she had embarked upon? What if her voice cracked under the weight of anger or grief? The closer they drove to the meeting point, the more Helen's certainties began to intertwine with fear. Outside, familiar streets morphed into tumultuous paths. Known landscapes transformed into canvases, illustrating the chaos of her heart. And then, as they reached their destination, Helen felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. "Are you ready?" Eleanor asked softly, the warmth of her mother's voice anchoring Helen. "Yes," she replied, though in her mind swirled entangled threads of hope and dread, excitement and abatement. This was it, the moment of truth. The undisclosed particulars of her family history loomed ahead of her, shielded behind the veil of a man she barely remembered. She felt both alive and terrified, but the stakes were too high. The narrative demanded to be rewritten, and Helen was ready to take the quill into her own hands. As they stepped out into the cool air, Helen noticed each passing moment felt laden with potential. Would her father live up to her expectations, or further unravel the fabric of her understanding? With the weight of everything on her shoulders, she stepped forward, her heart steady yet anticipating the unknown. The real confrontation had arrived, and as she took each deliberate step toward the entrance, a thought pierced through her fog of concern. Would this meeting be the catalyst for a profound transformation, or merely a page in a still unfolding story? Helen stood outside the small cafe, heart pounding with the weight of the moment. The sunlight streamed down, lavishing warmth on her face while anticipation danced anxiously in her chest. Her father was inside, waiting. She glanced at Eleanor, who offered a reassuring nod, grounding her amidst the swirling chaos of emotions. As they stepped through the cafe's door, a bell chimed, signaling their arrival. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. Helen's gaze swept across the room, and then it landed on him. Her father, seated at a table in the corner, his fingers tracing the rim of a coffee cup. Time seemed to halt. Every heartbeat amplified the gravity of the situation. Once more she felt the flicker of uncertainty. Yet she squared her shoulders, focused on the clarity she had cultivated over the past few weeks. Today was not just about uncovering the past. It was about stepping into her narrative and reclaiming her voice. Eleanor followed closely as they approached the table. Her father looked up, surprise flashing across his features. For a fleeting moment, the tension crackled in the air before it settled into the silence of years lost. "Helen," he greeted, his voice laced with both unspoken longing and hesitation. "I'm here," she responded, her voice steady, yet the weight of emotion threatened to spill over. "There's a lot we need to discuss." He nodded, and they both sat down, the tension between them palpable. Helen's thoughts raced as she centered herself, recalling the strength she had fostered through her journey of exploration. She was no longer willing to let fear dictate her actions. "Why did you want to meet?" Helen began, her tone firm yet open. "What changed?" Her father shifted uncomfortably, as if stripping away layers of years repressed was an uncomfortable but necessary process. "I wanted to clear the air, to explain why I didn't reach out sooner." He paused, his voice low. "I was afraid of what I might ruin. Or what you'd have to confront." Helen pressed, feeling energy surge through her. This was her moment. The realization ignited a new kind of courage within her, one that had previously eluded her. "Yes," he confessed, vulnerability bleeding through his words. "I thought I was protecting you both by remaining distant. So much pain in my past. But now—" He hesitated, eyeing both women. "I see I only passed that pain on to you." Eleanor's expression softened, a flicker of empathy reflecting the hope coursing between them. "Understanding can alter the legacy we inherit," she added, her voice gentle, yet unwavering. The release of tension rippled around them as Helen leaned forward, searching his eyes for the elusive validation she needed. "We deserve to know the truth. Hiding from it doesn't protect us. It binds us," she said, feeling the resonance of her own words. He took a deep breath, the realization that his world was irrevocably changing settling in slowly. "You're right," he finally admitted. "There are things in my past. Things that relate directly to you. Secrets I kept to shield you from further harm." Helen felt a knot form in her stomach, a tumultuous mix of fear and empowerment. "What do you mean?" As he began to speak, recounting the missteps and failures that had warped their family dynamic, Helen felt the veil of uncertainty clear. Just a little. This was what she had sought. A moment of unearthing, of genuine vulnerability. Each revelation peeled back the layers they had wrapped around each other, exposing raw truths. An hour slipped by, the cafe fading into the background as they navigated their shared history. One filled with betrayals, choices made from fear, and missed opportunities. Helen's heart saturated with a complex mix of emotions. Sorrow for what had been lost, but satisfaction emerging from each answer she received. "I wished for a different narrative, one not riddled with chaos," her father said earnestly, his gaze interlocking with Helen's, and she felt the shift within her. Recognizing that though pain lingered, so too did the potential for reformation. "How can we create a new chapter for us?" Helen asked, introspection igniting newfound resolve. "We have a chance to rewrite our story now, not just hold on to the pain of the past." Her father nodded, a look of gratitude mingling with the remnants of guilt. "It will be a long road, but I'm ready to try," he said, and in that moment, she felt the profound weight of healing begin to take shape. Their connection was fragile and tentative, but layered with promise. The conversation transitioned from painful memories to hopeful aspirations, and as they shared dreams for the future, Helen felt the embers of their relationship glow brighter. Forging a new legacy together would not come easily, but the potential felt liberating. As they concluded their meeting with tentative plans for the future, Helen realized she was no longer the hesitant girl bound by the chains of her inherited legacy. She had stepped into the light, forged a path through the shadows, and emerged with a sense of purpose, ready to embrace healing, connection, and truth. As they parted ways, her heart swelled with strength. Helen had confronted her fears, dismantled the shadows of her past, and emerged transformed. Today was not just about a simple meeting. It had become a catalyst for opening new doors, rebuilding familial connections, and revitalizing her identity in ways she hadn't thought possible. In that moment of departure, she internally celebrated a formidable accomplishment. She had not only reclaimed her voice, but had set in motion a journey of restoration for herself and her family. As she walked towards the door, a sense of solid confidence settled within her. She was ready for the next chapter. Now remember, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm because it genuinely makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait. Even one more second. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of standing together through these actions.